Welcome everybody to another episode of our podcast and our first episode under the new name, which is The Power of You. So Bill, super excited to be with you again today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. This is so much fun every time we do it, and I love the new name and the new concept.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. We wanted to make this podcast as relatable as possible to as many people, and we've listened to some feedback, and we're here to, really hopefully make a difference in your lives, just like we have kind of done this work and it's made a difference for us too. So we're glad you're here. So Bill, obviously, you know, each time I kind of come up with a bit of a topic area and we tend to flow into it. So today, the thing that's really been on my mind is around expectations and how having expectations can often lead people to feel feeling disappointed or downbeat. And I don't think a lot of people realize they have expectations, or they've placed expectations either on themselves or on other people, until they feel these down feelings, or these feelings of I guess glumness or disappointment. And I wanted to ask, or start the conversation today by asking, what does expectation mean to you?
It's the comparison that's going on at the subconscious level between the ideal, the way this moment could be, and the way it's actually. Mm-hmm. And the moment, if you weren't comparing it to the perfect, version of itself, you could be loving. You could be loving the moment just as it is. And that's ruined by the comparison. And as you say, people aren't aware that they're doing that, so they don't even know why they're down, and they may not even recognize that they are down. So much is going on in the subconscious. My workshop partner, Jerry Zoltman, wrote a book in which he came out with the statement that 95% of all decision making is subconscious, which certainly turned the market research business on its ear, and is supported by neuroscience. There's Carl Friston, for example, who's one of the most cited neuroscientists alive today, a Brit, who has introduced this idea that the brain is constantly predicting, and that's where the expectations come from, is from the inference engine, he calls it, that's generating these predictions. And when I wrote my book, Mind Magic, I had never heard of Friston, and he wasn't doing that work then. But way back when I was writing my book, I knew that there was this prediction going on because I found it in myself. I was also seeing what I predicted, not what was actually happening. And so I caught myself in that, and I had my own theory about there's a prediction process going on, and now it's been verified by neuroscience. So there's layers and layers and layers of detail in this idea of expectations.
Yeah. Like you said there about the brain predicting certain outcomes, and that is almost happening without us necessarily even realizing it. And I think, and this is just my take, so I'd be interested to hear from you, but from what I'm aware, like the brain does that. It's almost because if we try to analyze almost every option, we would almost go into that analysis paralysis. So I think what the brain tries to do is tries to shortcut that. I'm almost thinking we're here in a park, right? And I'm almost thinking, rather than taking the long windy road to the end of the park, it's like, okay, well, I can just walk across the grass, and it's quicker. And I think that's what the brain tries to do, is shortcut a lot of that. But in doing so, you then are becoming attached to a certain outcome, or you're expecting to get to a certain destination. And say, using the path analogy, like if you're expecting to get to the other side of the park, but you're not necessarily looking for, perhaps a bike goes in your path or an animal runs by. So is that, in terms of like the science behind it, is that what's happening in the brain?
The science behind it is based on the survivable, species and evolving methods that increase the probability of surviving in order to be able to reproduce, and the species keeps going. So this part of the brain, the frontal cortex, is part of the process. We didn't have until about 200,000 years ago. So when you think about 200,000 years ago, in history, written history that we know of is only 6,000 years old. 200,000 years ago, it was long past the dinosaurs period, but they were saber-toothed tigers and there were all kinds of predators. And compared to most animals, humans are fairly weak.
Yeah.
And so we needed something, or we were going to be dead, and the species was going to be dead. So it came up with this, evolved this, software that fit into the new hardware, wetware actually, and it's been functioning, and it probably was more positively contributing to life back then than it is now. Now there aren't animals about to kill us. It's a whole different environment, and in the new environment it may be doing more harm than good. And that was my thesis in Mind Magic, and my thesis in my own personal life growing up as a kid, that I had these automatic impulses. It was like automatic pilot for me to do this. But then I realized, first of all, it didn't work. I didn't get to kiss the girl or whatever it was. And secondly, what am I, a robot? I always repeat the same thing and I'm doing everything automatically. I'm on automatic pilot. I'm not giving any fresh thought to new ideas. I'm not innovating. So I was concerned that these robotic habits, I knew that sometimes they came in handy, but most of the time they were doing harm. And so I evolved methods to take control of them to some degree and be able to choose, okay, there's an automatic pilot response, but I'm going to go with it. It feels like flow state. It feels like it's going to be the right thing to do. Oh, and it is turning out to be the right thing to do. So I'm just going to stop thinking and just keep doing whatever I'm doing. Or, I'll change my mind and say, no, I'm not. I'm in schmo state, and I'm fooling myself to think that it's flow state. I better watch my words. Better choose them carefully and not just fall back on playing old recordings and imitating myself.
Sorry, you want to just fix your shirt real quick?
Okay.
Great. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything's recording.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Okay, good.
So this is it. The expectation. I think this is where people might get tripped up, because it's also intricate, isn't it, right? These expectations, they're subconscious. It's your brain short wiring to try and keep you safe. But then, there's a lot of talk about like visualization and like, you need to almost imagine or be able to see what you want to create in order for it to become reality. So I think there is a difference between like having a vision and having, expectations. And I guess it might be interesting for people to kind of explore the difference between vision and expectation. How do you view that, those two different things?
Well, it's more complicated, but I can simplify it to start in that one is conscious and the other is not. And there's a definite value when you bring things into the conscious mind. It gives you more choice. You finally have free will. If you're just going to be driven by the unconscious impulses, then you're not really exercising free will. So, and that's a basic difference between conscious rehearsing what you want to have happen, mental rehearsal, visualization, I call it pre-dreaming, popularized by people like Jose Silva back in the 70s, Silva Mind Control. and many, many people are talking about. A side comment here, though, it's become kind of like a caricature of itself to some degree. People are using the term manifesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's as if all they have to do is want it, and want it enough, and it's going to happen. That's not the point, no. Yeah. You've got to pre-visualize it, and you've got to believe that it's going to happen. And you've got to actually pre-experience how good it's going to feel when you get there.
Yeah.
And I have an additional twist that I use, and that is I make sure that what I'm pre-visualizing is going to be good for everybody, not just me.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's my twist on it. So, but back to the main theme here.
Yeah.
So, making more of the subconscious conscious is definitely a main part of my work. Is, you know, just simply realizing what the subconscious is doing. Sometimes you don't want to overrule it. For example, flow state is an example of automated behavior. It's stuff that you know so well and you've done so many times before that there is a special program in there that's just for flow state, and it works on things that you're good at already.
Yep.
Now, if you're not particularly good at things, it won't automatically get you into the flow state. But you can change that the way musicians do by practicing.
Yep.
Practicing, music 4 hours a day, and then after a while, flow state happens. Yeah. You create the flow state program. Anyway, pre-visualization is a good thing because it's being done consciously. Yep. Unless you're pre-visualizing negative outcomes. Now that's where expectation comes back into the story, I think, because many of our self-limiting behaviors start with the subconscious expectation of failure. And I'd say it is a pandemic. That most of us are pre-visualizing failure without even realizing it. Yep. We're betting against ourselves most of the time, and that's happening subconsciously. Yep. And bringing that kind of expectation forward into the conscious mind is a high priority, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. And to give even just a more concrete example of this, say for instance, even for me, I'm thinking about TTM, right? Which is obviously the business that I'm working on. And when I think about that and what I want to create, it's a positive outcome. I've got a big vision for how it's going to be. But then in terms of the expectation, the route to get to that vision, I am constantly being challenged to be open about how that's going to happen. And I think, not expect to be at a certain point by a certain date or to, for anything to happen. And it's remaining that kind of while you have that positive visualization of what you want to create, and that's your North Star, that's fantastic. But you have to kind of be open to the route to get there. And I think for a lot of other people, like you say, it's what are you visualizing in your mind? Because, is it even something positive? Because what you said around people, a lot of people, they're almost imagining failure, or they're imagining the worst, and they don't even recognize that they're imagining the worst until you make that subconscious conscious, right? And a lot of the time in our coaching sessions, it's I was scared to do a speech in front of my team because, in case I got the words all wrong and everybody laughed at me, and then when you dig into that and you go, well, what's the likelihood of that happening? And even if it did, what's going to happen to you? And it's not until they talk through that they realize, okay, that's kind of a bit stupid, a stupid thing to be scared about, and perhaps I want to visualize something else instead. But I think the expectation piece can happen on a macro level, but also on little micro levels, not just on yourself, but we also place expectations on others and then become disappointed by other people's actions. And I think that is where, again, it's focusing the attention within is really important, because perhaps you're disappointed because somebody didn't call you back when they said they were going to, or somebody said they were going to come and visit you and they got busy and didn't. then you're disappointed. I think whenever you feel that thing of disappointment, I think it's a time to inquire within. I think it's time to inquire within.
I'd say that's a first principle in the sense that the most important thing to come back to over and over again is, am I enjoying the present moment? And if the answer is yes, that's great. But just asking the question and then realizing how much you're enjoying the present moment adds to it. Mm-hmm. But it also catches when you're not experiencing joy, because then you can dissect why, how come, why am I bringing myself down now? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did I expect that I'm not getting, or what am I fearful of not getting in the future, or what's bugging me? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a first principle that people should be enjoying what's going on, and if they're not, they should ask questions about, could this have something to do with expectations? Because that's a good clue. It often does have, in some way, something to do with expectations. Mm-hmm. Another type of expectation that I was thinking of as you were speaking is the expectations we have of other people. It may not just be, showing up late. It may be, like in my case, I tend to see the best in people. Mm-hmm. And so I'm expecting them to always act the best. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, so let's say it's somebody I love, which is most of the people I know. Mm-hmm. But, here's somebody I love, and look at the way that they're behaving. They're just so negative. That's the opposite of what I am or what I want around me. Mm-hmm. How am I going to get this person whom I love to stop being negative all the time? Mm-hmm. What would be the most likely to succeed way of explaining this to them? Mm-hmm. So that's another part of the expectations problem.
Yeah, you can place positive expectations or expectation, like you said, like you expect, or you almost like want to bring people with you. You're like, oh, come on, like I can, it's almost a blessing and a curse to see somebody's full potential, isn't it? And then be kind of frustrated or let down when they perhaps don't reach it. So I think, again, that is an art. So placing that kind of expectation on someone and being able to release that. But then also, expectations of expecting others to do things for you, or expecting somebody to show up and then be disappointed that they didn't. Because a lot of the time, that other person that you've placed the expectation on, one, isn't aware that you've placed an expectation upon them, and two, isn't necessarily aware that then they have done something to disappoint you, because you have put an expectation on them without them asking or needing to. And then, not only that, then you're upset with them when they have not done anything wrong necessarily. And then it's like a perpetuating cycle then, and it causes just so much upset, because the individual themselves is upset, but then the person that they're upset with is also, one, confused, and two, upset themselves. Then they get defensive, right? And then this negative spiral kind of ripples out, and that's everything that we don't want people to experience. So I guess, what would be some ways that people could notice that they're starting to put an expectation on somebody or on themselves? What are some signs that they could look out for?
Well, one is to be very aware of your own behavior. And if, for example, there's somebody, a friend, somebody you love, and they ask a simple question, but you think it's a stupid question, and maybe you're distracted, maybe you're driving or something, and you notice you answer them in a somewhat blunt way. It's just not a kind tone of voice. It's very subtle, though it isn't. You couldn't actually say that you're being harsh or anything, but you noted in yourself that, how come I'm overreacting? That's one way I do it, is just to hold up that invisible mirror all the time about my own behavior. Mm-hmm. Something else that you said that I wanted to come back to about, you've pre-visualized the outcomes that you want in your life. You're trying to help people bring out their total potential. You're trying to do it in the most effective ways possible. And you're not attached to the outcomes, particularly not the timing of them. You know, you certainly might have some degree of attachment to eventually getting there, but you're not putting any pressure on yourself about it's got to happen in 2024 or blah, blah, blah. While you're in that state, you may think that you know the path to get to where you want to go. Not just you, but all of us. And things may happen that seem to be totally irrelevant to your mission. But it would be good when something out of left field happens to just question whether that could be the universe offering you another path to where you're going. And to always do that whenever something surprising happens, to try to explain the universe's logic behind why that irrelevant thing is happening. Because it may have a bearing on your long-term goal.
And I know this is something I've personally experienced again and again and again, just even in starting the business, right? Because, you know, I'm human. Like I do have expectations, but I don't realize I do sometimes, but then I catch myself and go, oh, well, why am I disappointed that this deal didn't come through? Or why am I disappointed that, you know, it's taken so long? Like, why? Because I obviously expected something, but it's being able to catch that and be like, okay, so I think one, if you don't recognize it, like before it happens, I think recognizing it while it's happening or after it's happening is very important. So then you can like inquire, okay, well, what actually happened there and what can I do differently moving forward? Because as you've said, there's always like a little side door. And one thing I've realized is you might want to know the direction, you might want to know how things are going to go or turn out, you know, when you're going to get that job, when you're going to get married, have kids, you know, buy the house, you know, build your business. You might want to know all the answers, but you're never going to. And that's part of like the joy actually of life, is like, I'm almost imagining like a stage and you're on the stage, but then somebody's saying, hey, look, there's a side door here, and it's almost like this tunnel goes through to, I don't know, an even bigger stage, and you would have never known that. So it's being open to seeing the side doors, to see the side doors, recognize it, and then actually be brave enough to walk through the side door, even though you don't know where it's leading.
Absolutely. Yeah, something you just said about you might catch it after you've made the mistake. That, as people follow our advice and begin to utilize the idea of a more conscious mind style, what they will find is initially they'll catch that they goofed completely after the fact.
Yeah.
But then further down this path, they'll start to catch it sooner after the event, and then they'll catch it like while it's happening, and then they'll catch it before it happens. So that process works by itself once you start purposely noticing things.
It's just an awareness, isn't it, really? And it's even if you catch it afterwards, I think then you've learned, and we always talk about this, like life is learning, right? So again, look, we're all human. If you end up placing expectations unwillingly or unknowingly on somebody else or on yourself, right? And then you realize after the fact, like, how can you be kind to yourself? Because you are here to learn, and as long as you've learned from it, then you're going to be better. You're going to do better next time. It's like,
you should thank the mistake you made.
Yeah, like all mistakes and failing is like learning. As long as you learn from it. I mean, if you kept doing it, okay, you know, like then that's something else. But I think anybody that's listening, it's if you are aware enough that you have perhaps made a mistake or put an expectation on somebody else, then can you show yourself some grace and actually almost celebrate the fact, one, you recognized it, and two, you've learned from it?
It's a whole different way of living, but it's so much happier. You know, to not be attached, to take each moment as if it's a gift from God or the universe, and look at the positive potential in whatever's happening. Turn everything into the positive.
For people right now that are maybe sitting listening to this, and maybe they're now thinking about, where am I expecting like certain things in their life, and when they are able to recognize that, if they're doing that introspection right now, what do they do with the awareness once they're reflecting? So if they're reflecting right now, listening to this, what do they do with that introspection when they realize or become more aware of where their expectations are placed?
Well, there's a number of things they could do. They could keep a journal and write down the things that they're learning about themselves and their behavior and their ideas about how they foresee changing that behavior to be happier and more effective. So journaling is one thing. They could also do very specific, make decisions about what to do the next time that kind of thing happens. Maybe it's people in the office are picking on you. They know how to get your goat. They push your buttons and you flip out and you can't control yourself. So next time that happens, what are you going to do? Well, you're not going to flip out. You're going to control the one thing you have control over, you. And you're going to use the power that you have, the power of you. You're going to use it. And you'll laugh or brush it off or say, this is a fun game, you guys picking on me all the time. But I'm learning how to play it now. And just watch what happens then. They'll be bored with the game after that, and they'll have the utmost respect for you for being able to overcome these human foibles that almost everyone has of flipping out when people pick on them.
Yeah, so it's almost like channeling that awareness that you perhaps might have right now, whether it's through the form of writing, and that's a really simple way, and anybody can do it. Grab a pen and paper and just write. And I think, I was even talking to a friend about this the other day when they started journaling. They almost thought it was like a diary that someone was going to read, and trying to keep the handwriting neat. And I think with the whole practice of journaling, it is just like letting whatever's in your brain flow out of you and not overthinking that, because I think afterwards when you read it, there's a lot of insights that you perhaps you weren't even aware of. But I think once you get that out onto the paper, it feels more tangible. And I think that's something we talk about a lot in coaching sessions. It's like it's great to have that insight and awareness, but it's like having something makes it tangible. So that awareness, it's we talk a lot about the process of like integration and embodying these new learnings and new thoughts. And often, you can talk about it, but it's not until either like you maybe physically write it down and then it becomes like, oh, well, that's the process of integrating it. Or then, you take action and the integration happens through the action. But I think, so having that, like whatever that process is for you, like for me, obviously having our own coach, and I journal a lot now, like really helps me integrate and then learn from it. And as you've said, once you do learn from these, this is all part of the human experience, is learning. So when you do learn and then you change how you react, and if you aren't expecting certain things, you become more joyous, right, and happy, and like you say, it almost becomes humorous, right? And from that, the ripple effect then continues. Whereas we talked before about what happens when you place expectations on somebody and they don't realize, and then they end up being hurt and all this kind of stuff, and then that ripples. Whereas the alternative ripple is, in fact, a different one.
A couple of things about that struck me very, very strongly. One was, in this writing down process and the integration process, resolutions or intentions are an important part of the structure of the change in yourself. Knowing what your intention is. My intention is not to to keep my cool next time somebody picks on me, and to laugh it off. And then what you find is when you're given the first opportunity to do that, you might not have the ability to control your emotions. And then you start to wonder about that and journal about how come I can't control my emotions. And when you get to that stage, you realize it's because you're attached to something, which is a form of expectations. You're attached to people looking up to you. You want people to think highly of you and respect you, and that you're attached to that. And if you don't get that, you're crushed. And so you're depending on, you're dependent. It's like a heroin addiction. You have an addiction to something and you have no control over it. So obviously you have to gain control over it, which is going to be a gradual process. And that power of resolution, which is part of the power of you, is going to get stronger. Every time you enact it, you'll see. Like the first time you do it, people around you might be surprised, but keep picking on you. And then you might feel crushed and run out of the room. But then the second time, you'll feel crushed, but you won't run out of the room. And the next time you won't feel crushed, and so on.
As you talk there, I'm imagining, a really visual, I guess, comparison to that is almost like going to the gym, right? The first time you work out, you get the weights and you're like, oh my God, this is hard, right? And, you still haven't got the muscles, you still haven't got the six pack, but it's like that continued process of going, and slowly over time, in a month you see the difference, and in a year, wow, you're a whole different person, right? And I think it's the same, and it working in the mind too, and it's all this work, these little steps, they do add up, and it's the continued process of improvement, right? But I think the other thing you said around expectation being linked to attachment, I think that's a really important point to make, because they are two different things, but they are intrinsically linked.
They are. Yeah, they depend on each other. And people need the emotional strength and the emotional intelligence to control their emotional impulses. And it's hard to do that, but it's especially almost impossible to do that if you don't know what your mission is in life. If you do know what your mission is in life, the thing, your dreams that you want to have come true, your vision, what you want to be when you grow up, if you do know that, it gives you a strength to do all these other things that you don't have if you're just aimlessly flowing with, going with the dotted line solution, whatever is happening, I'll just go with it. I'll just go with it. And I lived a couple of decades of my life that way, just going with it. And I banged into a lot of walls. And I learned from it.
Well, and again, as long as you've learned, you can look back now and actually laugh, right? At an earlier version of yourself. I've always got a visual, a visual kind of in my mind now of a young Bill banging into walls, But I think that's the important point, really, and what I'm guessing we want people to leave with. It's having that. It's having that North Star. It's having that purpose, that direction, and For me, it's your purpose, so you'll always return to home, which is your purpose, which is your mission, and it's having the courage to follow that North Star. But first, you need to uncover and be able to find it. So when understanding your purpose, your North Star, everything else that you're expecting between here and reaching there, that's what needs to drop. But what people do need to find or leave with is an understanding of where they're aiming towards.
Yeah, because that's their reason for being, why they're on Earth, why they are who they are. It is who they are. And it could have, divine origin. We don't know. That's part of the mystery. Part of the fun of life is the mystery if we don't really know whether we're all one mind together or God or whatever. but it gives you a self-respect and a purpose and a meaning in life and a reason for being here, and therefore it gives you more self-respect because you're trying to accomplish something that's presumably a noble goal. It's something that's going to benefit people, something that's going to add value, not just narcissistically, but it's going to add value to people who know you, at least, your people, friends, people who are in your inner circle. At least for them, what you want to be when the game is over is in some way going to make them feel good too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's again, it's always it's like start with the end in mind, right? It's, you know, when you leave this world, like what's the story you want to tell? What is, you know, when you think of your life, what is the story you want to tell? So if you start with the end in mind, then the bits in the middle, that's part of the fun, like writing the pages, right? So but you have to have an end goal, because otherwise the storyline and the plot is just kind of aimless, right? And I think that's, again, where a lot of unhappiness comes from, is people not knowing the direction. And you said that you had to bang into a lot of walls in order to find it. And I know for me, it's only been in the last 5-6 years, well, 5 years probably, that I've found, you know, the direction or my end point, if you like. And I know how frustrating that is, banging into walls, because it's like, you know that you're here for something, but it's trying to remember and rediscover that. So yeah, I think for anybody struggling to find what their end point is, I think I don't know, this sounds so cheesy, but it is trusting the process, because had you not banged into the walls, like, you might not have met the people that you needed to meet at that point to guide you forward. So I would say trust the process, but I think you have to have an awareness as well. You have to have an awareness, but you also have to learn, because if you don't learn, then you're going to be banging into walls until the end.
Well, and you should look for clues. If you don't know where you're going, then you should remember back to the moments that made you the happiest, and the things that you did really well, that you were most proud of, that you felt, wow, I did that really well. I didn't know I could do it that well. Those things, those gifts, those evidences, those things in your youth that either made you so happy or made you so proud of yourself, those are probably a high probability that they have something to do with your endpoint.
Yeah, so I guess for anybody listening, there's a couple, I think, key takeaways from this day. It's around, one, finding your mission or understanding where your North Star is, and then 2, around the expectations that you're placing not just on yourself and others in everyday life, like to eventually get to that, you know, North Star. What are some key questions we could leave people with to one, understand when they're placing expectations on themselves or others, and then 2, around their mission and what they're here to do? What are some reflective questions we could leave them with?
Well, the first one is to look back in their lives to their proudest moments, their happiest moments, and to ask themselves the question, what future outcomes, what form of work do I want to do in my life that relates to those things that I did as a child that made me so happy? And also think about, did they ever have any dreams when they were kids of their future and what they would be doing in life that they've just abandoned as, oh, I could never be an actor. I know I always wanted to be an actor, but whatever it is, actor, musician, dog catcher, whatever it is, whatever they dreamed about. Those are a couple of the questions. Also, on a daily basis, like when they get up in the morning, are they looking forward to the day? that's about to occur. You know, before they get out of bed, before they even open their eyes, you know, am I looking forward to this day? And if not, why not? Because the object of life in the moment is to enjoy the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's the future, where you're going, but there's the moment. And most of your life is going to be the moment, not the end point.
Yeah.
So you better enjoy each moment. It would be silly to put off enjoyment until you reach the end point. That is a form of attachment.
Yeah.
I will not allow myself to be happy until I reach the end point.
Yeah.
That's silly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, because you're in the moment more than you're in the end point, right? So I guess the questions are then, it's what can you, sorry, I lost the chain of the questions. So the question,
What can I learn from my childhood experiences about my end point? And then in each day's first moment, am I looking forward to the day?
Yeah.
And then every moment of the day, whenever you remember to ask yourself, am I enjoying the moment? And if not, why not? Am I attached to something? Am I expecting something I'm not getting? Why do I have these expectations? Why do I consider them reasonable? Why aren't they just stupid and self-destructive? Why can't I just stop doing that to myself?
so really, what did I enjoy as a child, right? What lit me up? What did I dream about? Try to take yourself back to childhood to remember that. But then also asking yourself, am I looking forward to today? And if not, why not? Asking yourself those introspective questions should leave you with insights around, one, how you're feeling about your life, two, give you clues towards your mission, but three, also likely highlight where there is expectations, either for your day ahead or for your life ahead, really, as well. And I know that sounds probably super deep, so you don't need to have your whole life planned out, but I think just some of the practical tips you've talked about, around writing, asking some introspective questions, and just noticing when you do feel that feeling of disappointment. And just like going to the gym, like, you're probably going to feel disappointed a few times before you recognize and catch it before it happens that you've so again, but show yourself grace, because it's all part of the learning and it's all part of the growth, and that's what we're here to do.
Great summation.
Oh. Well, thank you for another fabulous episode, our first live episode, and our first under our new name of The Power of You.
Thanks for coming. See you next time.
See you next time. Oh, amazing.
Well, that's 44 minutes.
Oh, I thought,
Wow.
I lose track of time. It just, that's a crazy flow for me. That just, I'm like, I come out and I'm like, ugh. Do you not feel like that? It just time just...
It does itself.
Oh my God. I feel like I do. When I come out of a coaching session, I'm always like a bit...